Well, hello. This is the unit circle and how we can make this potentially in under 3 minutes. Yes, it is possible to make the unit circle with all of the degrees and all of the radians and all of the points. Not simplified, that's fine, but to be able to make all of this in about 3 minutes. So, we've got to look at this, and there are a few things that we're going to talk about. Number one, they give you already the degree symbol, so that's where our degrees will be. And then the other blank, which is just next to it, that would be where our radians will be. And then each one of these points, now if you notice, each one of these points has a fraction bar. It almost looks like it's an underlined space, but it really isn't. It really is there to help us say, hey, there's a fraction going to be happening each one of these. Okay? So, to make this go faster, the first thing I would say is go in and put your degrees in there. You should know your degrees. And so, we go through and say, okay, I got 0 degrees, I have 30 degrees, 45, 60, and 90, and then I go to 120, 135, 150, 210. Now remember, when you're doing this, a lot of these, you just have to remember your first quadrant and just kind of use the multiples of it. So if I'm looking at a 30-degree angle, 2 times 30 is 60. So I'm here. And then 120. Or 90, and then we go to 120, then 150, and I realize I actually made a mistake there. That is 180, and then add 30 to 10, then add 30 again, which is jumping over a spot, with 240. 240 seems to be a bugger. A lot of people forget that one. In between those two would be 45 plus 180, or 225, and then you go to 270. Add 30, 300, add 30 again would be 330, go back in between what's 270 plus 45, or halfway between 330 and 300, be 315. So, and we could technically finish this up and say that is 360 degrees, but we don't have to. Now, that was the degrees. I think the degrees for us probably goes pretty quickly, pretty easily. Radians might be a little bit of stretch, but if you kind of think about how it's being multiples of the same thing, it's multiples of 30 or it's multiples of 45 is what it comes down to. And so you remember, hopefully, and we'll use that middle line sometimes as a fraction bar, that 30 degrees is pi over 6. And then it goes pi over 4, pi over 3, and pi over 2. Once I go to 60 to 120, 120 is 2 times 60, or 2 times pi over 3. So 2 pi over 3. Then I can go to 3 pi over 4. And then I can go to 5 pi over 6. 180 is equal to pi. Then we can go to 7 pi over 6. And then, if you think about it, that pi itself is a whole number. So that would be like 6 pi over 6, 4 pi over 4. And so if I go one more fourth of a pi, I'd be at 5 pi over 4. This one would be 8 pi over 4 of 6. But since we're talking about thirds, I can say, hey, this was 3/3 here. That means if I go another third, I'm at 4 pi over 3. 3 pi over 2. And if I add another 60, it got me to 300. This would be 5 pi over 3. And finish that would be 6 pi over 3, which would lead me to 2 pi way over here. But then I could start thinking of that 2 pi is really 12 pi over 6. So this has to be 11 pi over 6. And if I take 1 less eighth, I'd be at 7 pi over 4. I mean, fourth, sorry. 1 less fourth. I would say if there's something that's going to take the most time, it's going to be your radians. So take the time, study and practice those in a particular order that's going to be fast for you. Now, we can go back and we can start to fill in the values of our points. Now, technically, you should be like, okay, what's the sine of 30? What's the cosine of 30? Because remember, our points are made up of cosine and then sine. Cosine, comma, sine. Cosine theta, comma, sine theta. But here's a really cool thing. What I propose that you do is I say you start with your quadrantal points, your quadrantal angles. That's 0, that's 90, 180, and 270. You should be able to look at the unit circle because you know the unit circle has a radius of 1, that if I was here at 0 degrees, I'd be at 1, 0. If I go straight up, I would be at 0, 1. If I go straight left, I'd be at negative 1, 0. And if I go straight down, I'd be at 0, negative 1. So I propose, put those quadrantal angles in first, and then here's the really cool thing. I also then propose that on every single other part, it looks like a fraction, because I'm going to treat it like a fraction, and every single one of those is divided by 2. So without even thinking, I'm going through and dividing everything by 2. So I'm doing that. Doesn't take any thinking or pretty much any time. Okay? Then, the second to last part is I go back and I put square roots on the top of everything. Square root, square root, square root. If the marker would work on here. Square root, square root. Everything's getting a square root now. Again, no thinking involved at this point. I'm just filling these things in to set it up. Now, to finish this, actually, there's one more step after this, is that all I have to do is count to 4, or count to 3, and then back down from 3. Which is really quite cool. So, what I'm going to do, starting in this first quadrant, I am going to start at the first spot as the y, and say, since it started at 0, where am I here? Here. And I am going to move upward from there. This next spot has to be a 1, 2, 3, and then be 4. Well, it really should have been 4 over square root of 4 over 2, but we already simplified that part. But here's the cool thing, is that there's a 0 here. So on the way back down, I go 1, 2, 3. And so it looks like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So can you count to 3 and 3 again? Move to quadrant 2. Quadrant 2, the 0 is in the x spot. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Move into the fourth quadrant, the 0 starts in the y coordinate. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 on the way back. And fourth quadrant, the 0 starts in the x coordinate. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You have now just found all of your ratios in every single quadrant. Guys, if you remember anything about the unit circle just uses the same exact ratios. It's 1/2, because the square root of 1 is 1, so it'd be 1/2, so 1 over 2. Square root of 3 over 2, and square root of 2 over 2. Those are the only things that we have. And then 1 and 0 for our quadrantals. The last part that you guys have to even think about is which quadrants are things positive or negative. And for this one, all you have to do is think about where's x positive, where's y positive. In the first quadrant, everything is positive. So they're all positive. In the second quadrant, x is negative, so I go through and put negative, negative, negative in front of the x's. In the third quadrant, both x and y are negative because they're going backwards and down. So therefore, I put a negative, 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 negative. And in the fourth quadrant, just the y's are negative, so I put a negative in front of all of them. So there you go. The negatives and things, as long as I can read it and I can say, hey, you know what you're doing, you're going to be good. I don't expect you to simplify square root of 1 because this is a speed test. It's all about speed and accuracy. We can always clean it up later. The goal is to be able to finish this in 3 minutes. Good luck.